Hey everyone, it's time to learn. Yeah, so we got the Federalist Papers here. If you're into political science, this is the nerdiest of the nerdiest. Alright, now we're on page 25. We're still in Alexander Hamilton's essay. Letter. Letters of reprisal were granted, and a war ensued, which as in its consequences overthrew all the alliances that but 20 years before had been formed with sanguine expectations of the most beneficial fruits. From this summary of what has taken place in other countries whose situations have borne the nearest resemblance to our own, what reason can we have to confide in those reveries which would seduce us into an expectation of peace and cordiality between the members of the present Confederacy in a state of separation? Peace and cordiality. Have we not already seen enough of the fallacy and extravagance of those idle theories? Look at that. Idle theories, and he's calling them extravagance. It's so pompous to think that oh, kumbaya. But he's saying it ain't so. Which have amused us with promises of an exemption from the imperfections, the weaknesses, and the evils incident to society in every shape. Is it not time to awake from the deceitful dreams of a golden age? He said deceitful dreams of a golden age. And to adopt as a practical maxim for the direction of our political conduct that we, as well as the other inhabitants of the globe, are yet remote from the happy empire of perfect wisdom and perfect virtue, the happy empire which contains perfect virtue and wisdom. Let the point of extreme depression to which our national dignity and credit have sunk. If he was alive today, he'd be like, what? Let the inconveniences felt everywhere from a lax and ill administration of government. Let the revolt of a part of the state of North Carolina, the state menacing disturbances in Pennsylvania, and the actual insurrections and rebellions in Massachusetts declare. So far is the general sense of mankind from corresponding with the tenets of those who endeavor to lull asleep our apprehensions of discord and hostility between the states. In the event of disunion, that it has from long observation of the progress of society become a sort of axiom in politics that vicinity, or nearness of situation, constitutes nations' natural enemies. Whew. The Union is definitely busted today. An intelligent writer expresses himself on this subject to this effect. Let's see. Neighboring nations are naturally enemies of each other, unless their common weaknesses forces them to league in a confederate republic. To league in a confederate republic. What an interesting phrase. And their constitution prevents the differences that neighborhood occasions, extinguishing that secret jealousy which disposes all states to aggrandize themselves at the expense of their neighbors. Ooh, so states that, use their neighbors to aggrandize themselves. This passage, at the same time, points out the evil and suggests the remedy. Publius. Ooh, that's a banger right there. At the same time, this piece that I have written tells you the evil and gives you the medicine. Alright, his next essay says, number 7, the same subject continued. Very catchy. It is sometimes asked, with an air of seeming triumph, what inducements could the states have, if disunited, to make war upon each other? It would be a full answer to this question to say precisely the same inducements which have, at different times, indulged in blood all the nations in the world. Wow, tell them how it is. But unfortunately for us, the question admits of a more peculiar answer. There are causes of differences within our immediate contemplation, of the tendency of which, even under the restraints of a federal constitution, we have had sufficient experience to enable us to form a judgment of what might be expected if those restraints were removed. If the federal constitution was removed, Even under the federal restraint of the federal constitution, if the restraints of it were removed, well, you'd get despotism and corruption and a corporatocracy. Territorial disputes have at all times been found one of the most fertile sources of hostility among nations. Ah, yes, Hong Kong and China right now. And Taiwan? Perhaps the greatest proportion of wars. Oh, and Pakistan and India, right? Yeah. Perhaps the greatest proportion of wars that have desolated the earth have sprung from this origin. This cause would exist among us in full force. We have a vast tract of unsettled territory within the boundaries of the United States. There are still a discordant and undecided claims between several of them, and the dissolution of the Union would lay a foundation for similar claims between them all. It is well known that they have thereto had serious and animated discussions concerning the right to the lands, which were ungraded at the time of revolution and which usually went under the name of crown lands. Wow, so at this time, right, they have these crown lands and they're like, okay, we gotta take it back. The states within the limits of whose colonial governments they were compromised have claimed them as their property. So crown lands versus colonial governments, okay. The others have contended that the rights of the crown in this article devolved upon the Union, especially as to all the part of the Western Territory which, either by actual possession or through the submission of the Indian proprietors, they didn't really want to submit though, was subjected to the jurisdiction of the King of Great Britain, till it was relinquished in the Treaty of Peace. This, it has been said, was at all events an acquisition to the Confederacy by compact with a foreign power. I think, yeah, when they were back in the Indian reservations. It has been the prudent policy of Congress to appease this controversy by prevailing upon the states to make cessions to the United States for the benefit of the whole. This has been so far accomplished as, under a continuation of the Union, to afford a decided prospect of an amicable termination of the dispute. A dismemberment of the Confederacy, however, would revive this dispute, and would create others on the same subject. Okay. At present, a large part of the vacant Western Territory is, by cession at least, if not by an anterior right, the common property of the Union. If that were at an end, the states which have made cessions on a principle of federal compromise would be apt, when the motive of the grant had ceased, to reclaim the lands as a reversion. So to reclaim the lands as a reversion, the rights of the anterior. Interesting. The other states would no doubt insist on a proportion by right of representation. The electoral college, maybe? The argument would be that a grant once made could not be revoked, and that the justice of the participating territory acquired or secured by joint efforts of the Confederacy remained undiminished. Joint efforts to keep the Confederacy united and not diluted in power and territory. If contrary to probability, it should be admitted by all the states that each had a right to a share of this common stock. States having a right to a common stock, aka the Commonwealth, right? There would still be a difficulty to be surmounted as to a proper rule of apportionment. Different principles would be set up by different states for this purpose, and as they would affect the opposite interests of the parties, they might not easily be susceptible of a pacific adjustment. So an easy adjustment might not be as potent because there's opposite interests in the parties with also different principles. In the wide field of Western Territory, therefore, we perceive an ample theater for hostile pretensions. An ample theater! He said, there's an ample theater for hostile pretensions. It's like, look at that. Without any umpire or common judge to interpose between the contending parties. No referee or a common judge to be like, hey, you do this, you do that, you two gonna get along, I'll be the mediator. He's saying none of that. He can write, Alexander Hamilton, can't he? What do you think, family? It's very interesting.